In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create doors and windows from existing geometry. Now, a little bit on this subject has already been touched on when we created the garage in the beginning of the modeling section of this course. Now, I'm going to just carry on from there, and I'm going to basically just show you how when we modeled this garage, we basically created a spline that traced around the outside of the wall. We extruded it and then added an editable poly. Now, with that editable poly, it allowed us to go and select these three objects, or the three polys here, which are our garage doors, and it basically allowed us to detach that. The result is that we now have these objects that have been cut out of our model, and we now can do with them whatever we like in order to modify them to become the garage doors. Now, having this in your workflow is much quicker than going and redrawing everything from scratch, because you would otherwise have to redraw the line at the bottom, re-extrude it, or look at the elevation if there was one, and draw it from that elevation. So it just allows you to be a lot quicker, a lot more accurate, since everything is based on something that already exists, which you know to be correct. Now, I just want to also let you know that once you have floor slabs in place and you can see that the walls need to be edited, it's a good time to go and make those edits. Now, instead of just going and pulling down these edges, a little tip that I'd like to give you is that try to keep an edge in place wherever you have your floor slab at that area. So for example, if the upper level has a floor slab at this height, which happens to be 2.45 meters, try to keep that line in there so that you can snap onto it and you can basically start to read your height differences. So I'm just going to convert my selection to a vertex by clicking Control, or holding down Control and clicking vertex. And I'm going to just transfer this to 2.0 meters. And basically I want to get it at the right height. I think this is 2.2. I need to actually have a look by turning on the layer with the slab heights. So this is 2.15. So at this point you want to have that line of edges or vertices at that floor slab height, just so that you have the reference in place, and then go and just extrude it downwards by holding Shift, just to basically make sure that it goes underground. Later when we add our contour model back in, you'll basically have that disappearing underground. So here you see as well that you will have to edit this editable poly that is now your garage door. So let's go and use these edges as our references. I'm just going to turn off the CAD layer, and let's just use that and basically use these 2 points as reference to snap onto. And it's much easier to have this, and you can start to see why right now. So the next thing you want to do is, with your plan now turned on, you can go and move your garage doors into the correct place. So you can take that object and move it back into the location where your doors are actually happening. And you'll see that right now your object is going right to the end, but we have the situation where we have frames around our garage doors, as you would imagine. So what you want to do in this case is you want to actually start to model in those doors. So there are a few methods that you can use to get this, and I'm going to try to cover a relatively wide set of options for you. Again, just like with the walls, I'd like to show you all the different ways that you can go ahead and do this. So one of the ways which you can easily do it is by selecting the vertices, or sorry, selecting the edges. So let me just go and select the three bottom edges which I don't want to select, and then select the inverse of that. So it's much quicker than selecting all of these 9 edges on top. I'm just going to select the 3 and Control I, so that's a lot quicker. And with those edges selected, I can then go down to create shape from selection. I can choose linear since it is all straight, and that will now include a set of splines just around the sides, tops, and other side of each of the doors, since we don't have a frame going down at the bottom of a garage door. So this spline now allows me to add a sweep modifier, which I can then configure any which way I like. And this, I think, is one of the best methods, as it allows, just like with the pavement edges, if you followed from the beginning of the course, just like with the pavement edges, we were able to go and manipulate these sizes. And the reason why I love this is that clients often change things as you go through your process of working on your building. So try to always have things set up so that you can go and change them just as quickly as your clients change their minds, which is often very, very quickly. So I'm basically just now moving that spline into place, moving it to the left, and I'm just increasing this amount. I think it should be about 150, 0.15. And if I now look at that in 3D, I now have my frames. I can turn off smooth selection and smooth path since there is nothing rounded. And there you have it. You can also now give some depth to your doors, some thickness. So onto that editable poly, let's just drop a shell modifier and let's give it a thickness of, let's say, 0.25. It may be slightly bigger, but it's going to be enough just to give us that impression of thickness if we do model any detail like grooves or something into these doors. So I'm going to leave the doors right at that, and I'm not going to continue anymore since you can, I'm sure with your experience, go and add other details to it. And I'm going to just cut across to the area over here, and I'm going to cover that in the next lesson since we're going to start tackling this very large window that we have, or at least a set of sliding doors that we have, and that's going to be coupled together with some of these other glassed areas such as this. So we're going to start perhaps with the easier one and then move on to the more difficult one where we have these moving sliding panels everywhere at different areas or different positions on plan as they all slide past each other. And eventually what we want to end up with is we want to be able to animate the opening and closing of all of these doors, since that is a very, very vital aspect to our design that we can show off using this type of animation, where at least you can animate it in an open and closed position and do renders very quickly by opening and closing your doors. So start to think about what you want to do with your final render and how you want to have your model manipulatable, so that when you do the modeling of it, you can already start thinking about what the end product is going to be. It's very difficult to try and backtrack and try and add an instance modifier, for example, or an instance function, or any such function to your objects once they are created. Once it's done and they're not instance, it's too late. So just think about it ahead of time, how you want to have things made, how you want them to be editable, and how you want to use them towards the end of your project. So with all of that talking out the way, this is the end of this lesson. What we did, just to recap, is we basically used existing geometry from the walls, we detached it, we then used the edges to create splines, we sweep those splines, and all of this is just basically working by removing layers upon layers from existing geometry and creating new objects. So next up is going to be these windows over here, so hang on for that in the next lesson.